Welcome to CPS Chat. I'm Madison.
And I'm Julia.
We've got a great lineup for you today. First of all, Julia brings us a story on the Rockbridge High School blood drive.
Last week, Rockbridge hosted their annual Halloween blood drive, and dozens of students decided to face the needle for the thousands of Americans in need of blood.
There is an 85% chance that your loved one is going to need a unit of blood sometime throughout the course of your life. And the Red Cross inside of the United States, we transfuse a patient with a unit of blood every 2 seconds. There is a constant need. The only way when somebody needs a unit of blood, a lot of times there is no other option, and the only way to get it is through a voluntary donation, such as blood drives like this.
The students donating appreciate the need for blood and are willing to help those in need for many reasons.
I have A positive blood, which is like the second most common type that like a third of Americans have, so there's a high demand for it, so I really felt like there's a huge need for my blood in particular, so I felt that was necessary that I do it.
I donated because it's just a good experience and kind of getting to just other people.
The blood is used for many purposes, and it's given nationally but also locally.
So what they're donating here is called whole blood. They're going to get 3 different products off that because each unit of blood can save up to 3 lives. So they're going to get a unit of plasma, platelets, and red blood cells off of every unit from there. And then from there, we're going to go out to the hospitals that we serve. We do serve all the hospitals here locally. We will meet their need first, and if we have an overage, we will send it out regionally and then nationwide, depending on what the need is.
This has been Julia Bower for CPS 360.
Great story, Julia.
Thank you, Madison. Next, Madison sat down with Richard King from Thumper Entertainment.
And now for the interview portion of our show, I'm here with Richard King, former owner of the Blue Note and current president of Thumper Productions. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, I'm honored to be here.
So first of all, what got you interested in the music industry?
Well, you know, that's funny. Just growing up, I wasn't really good in academics, but I loved music. I cannot play an instrument, but I just love music. So, and back in when I was young, things like the Beatles were just starting to come in, the Rolling Stones. So everybody that was young was really interested in stuff like that. So that's kind of how it got started. But I was pretty young, like before I was 8 or 9 years old when I really started liking music.
So, did the idea of the Blue Note come from that passion for music?
Well, it did. I mean, you know, that never changed, and every opportunity I had to go see a band that I liked, I would do that, you know, but when I was younger, like all through high school, like I think Woodstock was happening when I was a sophomore in high school, and I really wanted to go, but my mom and dad said I couldn't. Now, some of my friends just went anyway, but you know, all the way through that time period, there was, you know, and the music scene just kept getting better and better. You had more exposure to bands and things like that. Record stores, which are a thing of the past, were where we hung out all the time. So, you know, that's kind of where everything came from.
So can you describe the development of the Blue Note over the years?
Well, it wasn't pretty at the beginning, I can assure you that. I think the funny thing about taking on a business like that, we really thought we were the smartest guys in the world. And you pretty much learn real fast that this is not going to be easy. And there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of learning to be done. I mean, it was, you know, I wouldn't trade that for anything. I mean, the experience was incredible, but the first 5 or 6 years was an incredible learning experience. And you know, you learn on the job how to run a business, how to set a PA up, how to clean a bar, how to clean the bath. You know, you pretty much had to do everything. So it was a real education for us.
At the beginning, how did you guys go about booking artists?
Well, one of the things about, this is in 1980 when the Blue Note started, and one of the things about that particular time period was, you know, there was a lot of, there wasn't any social media, okay, but something like MTV back in 1980 was all about music. So we had that going for us, and we just had a genuine interest in bands that were up and coming, that were not, you know, real radio friendly, so we focused on that. And then we had people that helped us along the way that were involved in local radio programming that talked to us about certain blues and R&B acts and stuff like that. So that was there was a great education there for me because, you know, people like John Lee Hooker and just all kinds of blues guys like that Buddy Guy, they were at that level, you know, playing club level, and we really learned a lot about that. But you know, those were the main ways, and like I said, we spent a lot of time in record stores, so we knew what music was we liked, and we did everything we could to promote it.
So I'm sure you've met a ton of super cool people. Who would you say are some of the coolest bands that you've been able to meet?
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. You know, I mean, you know, for me, I know once I did learn, you know, how it worked. You know, I always felt it was important to let the artist leave them alone. You know, it's a performance they're about to, you know, and sometimes they just like to be left alone. Now, if they're open to talking or meeting with you, I mean, my role, honest to God, my role would be, I would come in and talk to the tour manager and make sure everything was okay, and if the artist was willing to, you know, say hello, I would just go in and say thank you. And my goal was to say thank you for coming to Columbia, Missouri. I know there's a million other places you could go to. But to answer your question, you know, I'd have to say the first time I met Chuck Berry, which I believe he came out to the school years ago, that was a very, it was an amazing encounter. And also another person that I met that I just completely loved, who was one of the sweetest guys in the world, was Snoop Dogg. You know, there's so many. I can remember the early days of like when REM was just getting started, and we hung out with those guys. You know, it wasn't like you know, everybody was coming up. You know, so some of these people you actually grew up with in the industry, and you were like friends. You know, that kind of thing. But I'd say Snoop and Chuck Berry with two. But there's a long list. Johnny Cash was another one.
Yeah.
You know, if I start getting my memory going here, I could come up with a long list. But those three are really significant individuals that were just very impressive.
Can you talk a little bit about your transition out of ownership of the Blue Note, and then now your new adventure, Thumper Productions?
My new life? Well, I've been at Thumper now from the beginning, and we just celebrated 10 years. But you know, separating myself from the Blue Note was a very unusual experience, you know, because I always felt like I had to be doing something when I had the Blue Note, and I always did, you know, there was always something to do. But I found myself going, wow, I really have free time here. Like, I can do whatever I want. I can go see a movie, you know, I can whatever, you know. The first year, for me, it was like trying to figure out what, you know, how this works, you know, how do I keep myself busy, trying to enjoy life more. I have 2 teenage sons, and I really wanted to get to hang out with those guys. So the transition, it was interesting, but I think it went really well, and it was certainly, my years at the Blue Note were great, but I'm really grateful now to the time that I have.
Mm-hmm. So Thumper Productions, just describe a little bit what that's about.
Well, Thumper Productions, it started basically as the company that ran the Roots and Blues Festival, and it started in 2000, probably 2008 or 9, okay, and it was just myself and Steve Schweitzer and Betsy Ferris, and we just were trying to figure out how to make this festival successful. And there were so many challenges involved with what we were doing. But the thing was that the three of us, and there were other people involved, but the main, like myself, Steve, and Betsy, we were all very focused on making this work, and we were determined to make it work. And it took some time to make it work. It still takes work to, everything changes. But the Thumper experience to me has been so rewarding. Getting to work with Steve Schweitzer, who is just a brilliant man, and of course working with Betsy, who has just passed away. She became my best friend, and she was the hardest working gal, and her love and passion for what we were doing was, she just lived it every day, So Thumper is it's sort of a little bit easier for me. It is a year full-time, around-the-clock, job, but there are some times for breaks and stuff like that. But it's a full-time job.
Yeah. Looking back over your career, what has been kind of the most surreal moment?
Oh boy, the surreal moment. There's been so many of them. I'd have to go back to meeting some of those artists that I mean, I'm not kidding you. When Johnny Cash walked into the Blue Note that time, I was in awe. I was just like, oh my God, this guy is really 6 foot whatever, and he is a big man, and he does wear black, and he's just but the sweetest man in the world. That moment, like I was telling you, the Snoop Dogg experience, and that would be a long story, but it was truly incredible meeting Snoop Dogg. There's just so many artists that I've had the opportunity to meet and hang out with and consider them friends and things like that. I will say that the first time I met Chuck Berry was a real test for me, because I was supposed to supply a certain guitar amplifier for Chuck Berry, which they had stopped making 25 years earlier. So I had to not only find that amp, in fact I had to find 2 of them, and I found one in Neosho, Missouri, and the other one somewhere in Oklahoma. But the experience of him coming in, because I heard so many stories about him, and he truly is, the father, in my opinion. I mean, you think of the songs that guy wrote, but when he walked in the building, I mean, he's a very straightforward guy, and he came in and introduced himself, and he was a perfect gentleman. I was like going, wow, I heard so many stories about him. This guy's really nice. And then I said, okay, do I call you Chuck or do I call you Mr. Berry? And he goes, you can call me Chuck, and he went over and he looked at the guitar amps, which was, my stomach was, just a mess, because I didn't know what he was going to respond to, and he just looks at the amps and he like kind of reaches down, looks at me, looks up, and he goes, son, you did good. Where'd you get those? And I told him the story, and we've become friends. I mean, I know that his health is not great right now, but every time he came to Columbia, he treated me like I was his best friend, and you have people like that. Lots of stories like that for me are just so rewarding. So those would be that. I think they would rank up there. There's many of them though.
Yeah. So looking back over your career, you've obviously been such a gift to the Columbia community, bringing a lot of diverse music. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, I mean, we were filling our own needs back in those days. I mean, honestly, Phil Costello was the man I started the Blue Note with, and we really felt that there was, it's clear that I love Columbia. It's been great to me, but we thought that we could do more. There was a lot. Like I said, the music scene back then was just starting to take off. Like I said, MTV and alternative music and things, and those were the things that we were interested in, along with other things we were willing to learn about. So that whole that building process, that whole time period, there was things that we really wanted to accomplish. There were bands that we really wanted to bring to Columbia, and we were bound and determined to bring those bands to Columbia. I remember the first time we had X in Columbia, and that was in 1982 or 83, and it was just unbelievable. The turnout, the way the band was, and things like that. So, I mean, we really loved listening to music, and if we were able to gain access to all this music, by buying records or cassettes or 8-tracks, whatever they were back in the day, we felt it was important that we do our best to get these artists to Columbia. That was really one of our goals. And believe me, it was a big learning curve there for Phil and myself. But it was, like I said, that's the way it should happen. We learned a lot. I certainly learned a lot over the 34 years.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much to Mr. King for coming on our show.
And thank you for watching another episode of CPS Chat.
Be sure to subscribe to CPS 360 for more episodes.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Madison.